Dearly beloved, welcome one and all, and to all, welcome. I'm Julio Torres, Reverend to some, Reverend on occasion because I work part time. But, uh, but I appreciate all of you coming today on this traditional British day. A lovely summer in England, isn't it? Um, Today's worship service follows the theme of the month, diversity. Um, and today I'm sharing a bit of my experience. I've titled the worship service, uh, the moments when I forget my words, Spanish colonized Caribbean spirituality. I'm Puerto Rican ethnically, so Spanish ethnicity, Spanish colony, all that good stuff. Diversity and Unitarianism is quite prominent when it comes to the spiritual and theology. We don't agree on much as a faith group. We have no creed. 150 years ago, we started making the decision to have open revelation, that being the divine comes at us from different sources. Now, for me, I'll be sharing a bit of the Caribbean sources, some of my Catholic spirituality, a bit of liberation theology. So if you haven't heard of the Taino ethnic group, if you haven't heard of Santeria or liberation theology, I hope today you'll learn a little bit about my journey with it. Oh, and one other thing I always thought was interesting is Spiritism. There was a bit of a Spiritist movement back in Puerto Rico, and they share with Unitarianism the free thought tradition, open revelation, divine coming from all manner of places. So go figure. If you didn't know Unitarians had something with mediums and seances, now you do. That being said, we light the chalice to acknowledge all dominant and oppressive structures to society, to the unity of matter, spirit, reason, and feeling, to the renovation of society. We light the chalice to establish a true balance and harmony to human institutions. And the second candle I lit is a little tradition from Lewisham Unity, the candle for the children. May they know the blessings of their ancestors, and may we change the world so they can thrive, so they can live their callings in a world of peace, abundance, and equality. And now, no time for singing. If y'all don't mind, open up your hymnals to number 68. That is I Dream of a Church. Stuart's going to do a bit of a playthrough, and then we're all welcome to stand if you want and sing through it. That is number 68, I Dream of a Church. So, Please be seated. So the reading for today is an excerpt from an academic paper called The Power of the Spirits, the Formation of Identity Based on Puerto Rican Spiritism. This starts off with a quote from an interview that was had with the author. "You doubt the spiritual world. Yes, I know that you think Spiritism is an invention of people's minds. And I also know that sometimes you are unable to explain many things you see. You even believe what I have done is not going to affect the landlord. After all, the landlord might be a non-believer. To you, Spiritism works only if the person is a believer. Well, to us, the believers, Spiritism is real. Everyone in the building knows what I have done tonight. Yes, as a matter of fact, they asked me to do it. They all believe in what I have done. You see, to us, the landlord is going to be affected by the spell because the spirits of light are on our side. We are building a unity which is hard for a non-believer to understand." That ends the quote, but then the author goes on in her analysis. In this case study, the members of the center live in a building neglected by its owner. And during and after several meetings, they discussed their problems. For instance, the lack of heating, caused by the landlord who ignored his traditional duty. And finally, they decided to clean the building spiritually and cast a spell to the owner to throw his spiritual faculties or guardian spirits off balance. Afterwards, they had a rally against the now unprotected, off-balance landlord. Hence, the common belief has prepared the ground for a common activity, namely the creation of a tenants association. They became aware of their interests as an ethnic group and as a class. Here we can once again see that Spiritism has indeed a notion of social movement that can create identity. Though an ill-organized group, it offered a common level of identification that empowered its members to fight for justice. And at the end, the landlord agreed to their demands. So ends the reading. And now, Stuart is going to explain, we're doing a few rounds. 3. We're doing this next hymn 3 rounds. So Number 163, the peace of the earth be with you. Uh, Peace of the earth In my sacred journey, my spiritual path, I have explored all manner of things. I grew up Roman Catholic, but there were certain things in my family which made me aware of some Puerto Rican traditions, the folk variety, brujeria, witchcraft. Now, because of that, I explored Wicca because it was in English and my Spanish is terrible. But then later in my life, I became Unitarian Universalist in the US. And because of that, it allowed me to explore my whole spiritual self. And I was grateful back in 2016, I took a class about African religions in the Americas, which included Puerto Rico. For those who don't know about Puerto Rico, it's an island that stretches, say in comparison from Oxford to Dover, and ain't much more than the M25. Now, one example of the religion I studied in that class was Santeria. Now, for those who don't know, it's a combination of Catholicism and West African polytheism, some nature religions. Again, some call it a folk religion. Today, if there's one thing I want you to take away, engage all the sources of truth which resonate to you. And then ask yourself, how do they engage with liberation from oppression? Now, mind you, my journey was full of internal conflict. I can't speak for all people, whether mixed race, colonial heritage, but for me, it's sometimes painful to think of the past. There's a history of dominance. There's slavery, there's genocide. It's all a bit difficult to reconcile. It's the same part of history when Puerto Rico was colonized, that you had the Inquisition occurring, when Catholicism split into different forms of Protestant identities, i.e., the lifetime of King Henry VIII. Now, for me and many others, it makes it that politics cannot be separated from spirituality. Now, mind you, in my case, I grew up fairly centered politically, but also in many ways right wing. But then again, my parents were part of unions. And over time, I've now become so left wing, I don't like being right handed. And again, y'all don't need to agree with me, just so y'all understand my bias. Now, Puerto Ricans, we're a single ethnicity, but our primary lineages come from Spain, West Africa, and the Taino indigenous people who knew the island as Borinquen. Now, Tainos in the pre-Spanish colonization world were nature-oriented. They had deities that reflected the supreme creator, one for hurricanes. The name was Huracan, in case you're wondering where hurricanes come from. Many other aspects of nature as well. There were also animists, kind of like in Shintoism in Japan. They believed that parts of nature had spirits, and anything from trees, oceans, mountains. They were an ethnic group which spanned the Caribbean. But there was even evidence of interactions with the Mayans in Puerto Rico because of some ball courts and other archaeological evidence. Now, Taino spirituality, not well documented. Mayan spirituality, very well documented. One thing I found fascinating, they have a tree of life with 13 limbs reaching up to the heaven and 9 pointing to the underworld. They're known for their astronomy. I could go into about it for ages, but they also were good at building structures without pack animals, so round of applause. Now, all that being said, again, I grew up Roman Catholic because Puerto Rico became a Spanish colony. I gave up Catholicism, but there's certain parts of Christianity I appreciated. There was a message of ending poverty, anti-imperialism. There was messages of people who have been colonized. Now again, Christianity, no religion, no scripture is perfect. But finding out about that helped me to restore a piece of myself which I had spiritually amputated. And let it be said again, Christianity ain't perfect. It's pro-imperial in some parts of its history, pro-colonization in other parts of its history. When the Spanish began to colonize the Caribbean, what's now Mexico, as well as the US, Central and South America, it was a time where conversion was just so important to them, particularly because they had hundreds of years with the Arabian Empire, a war back and forth. But people there, the Tainos, they adopted to their circumstances. But that being said, half of them died due to disease. And that was a fate shared by all indigenous cultures in the Americas. Some of them survived either by becoming wives to the colonizers. Some of them survived by fleeing to mountains, forests. And of course, some were enslaved. And then on top of that, bringing in Africans, with the way slavery came about, the slave trade, West African spirituality came to Puerto Rico, and it brought new traditions like Santeria. So when I titled this service, Spanish Colonized Colonial Spirituality, I should have said spiritualities, because there's all manner of stuff to draw from. Now, let it be said in my journey, I loved Wicca, loved neo-paganism, but it was a bit isolating. I didn't get along with fellow Wiccans. Personality conflicts, what can I say? But I do wonder in my life, the what if. What if I had better Spanish so I could have read about Santeria or spoke to my relatives a bit? It's one of those things, Santeria is a faith that celebrated the spirituality of West Africans under the guise of Catholic devotion to saints. And it turned into a fairly unique spirituality. Santeria loosely translates to a place of saints. Santa, saints, eria, a place of. They took Spanish saints and gave representations to their orishas. Now, these are deities or great spirits. So for example, you had the orisha Orula, and that was the orisha of divination and wisdom. But they worship that orisha under the guise of St. Francis. Both of them happen to have celebrations on October the 4th. So both of them have connections to animals. And it's full of music. It's full of dancing. It's full of food, energy, drink, singing, all the good stuff. Now, I've never been a part of it, but I support as a faith group for the most part. The reasons I don't, we could have another conversation about. And it's one of those things as Unitarians, if there's one thing we can learn from Santeria, yeah, we have music. But what happens if we were to color coordinate, all wear color, What if we were to dance a bit? I decided to walk around a bit during one of the hymns. What if we were all to just bust a move a little, Maybe it's just me. Never mind. Okay. We as a faith group keep things intellectual, which is fair, but, let's be honest, on Sundays, I don't always have the energy, but I had 2 cups of coffee. I also wouldn't mind a bit of rum or coconut beverage with my service, but that's me. But again, all my knowledge, academic. Other than a handful of superstitions growing up, my family never engaged in spiritism or saint worship. Although my grandmother, she apparently one time stopped a rainy day with a bit of a prayer, a bit of water, and a bit of salt, and she turned the cup upside down. Hey, take it from my parents, they tell the truth, And it's one of those things, Puerto Rico. It became a U.S. territory 1898, after the Spanish-American War. And we became citizens because when the U.S. entered World War I, they wanted to draft us to go to war. Now, my mom came to New York in the 60s, my dad in the 70s. I was born in the 80s, and by that time, they spoke English around the house. That being said, I spoke a bit of Spanglish, so they still stuck me in English as a second language in school and pressured to only speak English. Language is key, and I felt quite disconnected from my Puerto Rican roots because of it. But there's one thing. I learned it in seminary, and I live by it now. And I think Unitarians could certainly adopt it. And that's something called liberation theology. It is core to me. It is core to my spiritual expression. It's a way for me to incorporate Christianity into my pantheism. If you've never heard of pantheism, that's that God is the whole of the universe. That's where I'm at. And again, these things are topics I could talk for days. Liberation theology, I had whole semesters on, so I'll put it in a paragraph for you. It came out of Latin America in the 70s, but moved around the globe. And its key message is that God wants people to be liberated from oppression, to end suffering. Now, in the Latin American context, it referred particularly to something called the preferential option for the poor and the oppressed. Yeah, God loves everyone equally, but until we get everyone equal, the poor and the oppressed get the option, our preference. Again, as a spread, you had Black liberation theology, feminist liberation theology, you had Black women theology called womanism, all manner of things. Queer theology, it has gone all over the world and has taken many shapes and sizes. And that's core to my spirituality. Even if I am a bit low-key and animist, like the Taínos, I feel everything has a spirit of some sort, both nature and, for me personally, even the things that are human-made, like the chairs in the building. Like one time, I was walking with a fellow minister. We were chatting and just walking in the streets, and I tripped over a bike that was chained, and I apologized wholeheartedly to the bike. That was me. You should see me when I talk to ChatGPT AI, As Unitarians, when it comes to the soul, when it comes to life after death, it's not something we talk about, and if I'm honest, I remain fairly agnostic on the whole thing. But every once in a while, I believe that we could talk to the dead. Again, cast me on whatever day it is, it depends. And it's kind of where I connect with Spiritism, because they have three features in Puerto Rico, el Espiritismo. Three features which one academic points out. Because it was a fairly woman-led movement, again, back in the 1900s, early 1900s, they talked about patriarchy as being unnatural and antagonistic as a structure towards women. They believed in uniting matter with spirit, with feeling and reason. And then thirdly, they felt that they needed to use women as a whole to renovate society, to lead the renovation, to establish the true balance and harmony to human institutions. And that's a liberation theology from itself. Those that are most impacted by oppression leading the way to equality. And again, that was fascinating to me because originally I just thought, seance, talk to the dead, candles, what have you, radios, But it has a whole lot more than I gave it credit for when I assumed a few things. Let it be said, today, I don't want y'all to think I'm saying we Unitarians need to start believing in spirits, whether of ancestors or nature. I'm not saying we need to culturally appropriate any faith group from the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean to West African traditions. I'm not saying that. When I'm asking you, how does your faith go towards your ancestral roots? And then how does that impact your ideas of justice? How does that impact, ancestral worship, justice? How does that impact your relationship with the divine, where you see it? Whether it be in the atheist spectrum, the Christian spectrum, the nature spectrum, whatever spectrum. There's a dynamic in England which I feel doesn't always get talked about. People just say it's white, mostly. But there's a whole indigenous history that's there. The Cornish, the Welsh, the Scottish, the Gaelics, the Celtics, Viking, Anglo-Saxon, Roman migrants, all these things come into play. I don't hear it talked about often. How did that impact? How does feudalism impact your spirituality? How does the imperial nature of colonization impact your spirituality? Again, maybe not all y'all are from England, but certainly in the world, there's various contexts of that nature you can relate to. As a Spanish colonized Caribbean, born and raised in New York City, now Unitarian, I express my spirituality today working for justice, particularly these days with community organizing in a group called Citizens UK. And I'm happy to talk about it more, but again, long conversation. But if you're interested, Brighton has a Citizens UK chapter. Again, we'll talk about that later. But for me, my spirituality is heavily influenced by the teachings of Martin Luther King Jr., who was Christian. He started the Poor People's Campaign the year before he was assassinated. Probably was the reason why he was assassinated. He thought America needed a bill of social and economic rights for people, in the U.S. It didn't live to fruition, in case you didn't know. But the thing also, and why I bring it up today, with the crisis of the past few decades in England, I think the UK could use something similar. So I leave you today with the questions. How does spirituality, in your sense, engage with justice? How do you handle liberation as a spiritual concept? How does your politics and spirituality merge? Again, not just specifically, to support one political party over another, faith group, that's a big no-no, but I mean to simply say, how do we influence politics so that we can make our values a lived reality? And overall, I'll leave you with the final bit. How do you all bring liberation to the oppressed? That being said, thank you for listening. Now is a part of a worship service. I call it the spiritual moment. Half the time, because I'm not sure if I'm going to pray or meditate or what have you, but it's a good little thing I put in there. But today I would like us to do a bit of a guided meditation, followed by a minute or so of silence, and the steward's going to play a lovely piece of reflective music. So I would ask you all to just sit down, get grounded, chill, or if you want to dance and walk around, you won't have any issues on my end. But whatever you do, I ask you take some deep breathing. And keep breathing deeply. And I want you, in your mind's eye, envisage yourself in the land of your ancestors. Maybe some were an island people. Maybe some were landlocked. Who knows? Maybe they enjoyed the beach and fished. Maybe they were near a desert. But wherever you are, maybe envision yourself by a body of water, an oasis, a river, an ocean. Have a bit of a sunshine, a bit of clouds in the distance, a gentle wind. I want you to hear something. A celebration. One that wouldn't stop even if the weather was horrendous. Music playing, smell of food, bountifulness, bit of dancing. Pick out an ancestor. Start a conversation. Talk to them about anything and anything. And let the nighttime surround you both. And take a walk. And the stars are showing magically. It is clear. It is grand. The universe is before you. What do they think of the stars? What do they think of the wisdom of nature? What guidance would they have for justice? I'll leave you all to a minute or so of silence. Dearly beloved, I hope we had a good talk, a little bit of dancing. But now is the time in our worship, the candles of joys and concern. Now, mind you, we're live streaming, so if you don't feel comfortable leaving it online for a week, I can see about shutting it down, I'm not sure. But you could also come with silence as well. No need to share. But whatever's on your hearts, whether it be of great happiness or great sorrow, by all means, light a candle. Just one candle I lit that I want to share is the past week, historically, you had the atomic bombs in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but then there's also been the many fires around the world because of climate change, and it ain't looking like it's getting better, so that was a candle I thought I'd share with you all. But please, keep on coming if you so want to.
I'm not sure if you're allowed to speak.
You welcome come to the microphone. Yeah.
But something we do, so I thought I'd talk about the candle. So it's a candle of joy because my nephew has had a wee baby, baby Dion. So a candle of joy, and also remembering my gran who joined the ancestors a week ago, 3 years ago. So, thank you. I don't have speaking form, but I have a small song that is in my heart at the moment.
I'm just going to shift this slightly.
We are the words that our ancestors give us, the breath that they breathe into life, and to us the dreams that they dream in the days and the nights of us. And if those ancestors speak in a tongue of drought, a breath charred by the desert sun, too long left out, a dream splintered by what they've gone so long without. I go through my days clasping spectres of what came before, a riverbed deep and flooded with the law of the healers and witches, when knowledge was the barter for bread and people knew something of what they lived for. There's a rope twisted salty and I burn my hands, defiantly wrapped by the herbs, by the strands of the moon that float from the loom of the dark night, calling me to take up corners and land, but in the feel of it all I know something else, something bitter and acrid and pungent in the shadow self. I may be born of the earth, but the trees that were felled in my name, my mother's name, grandmother's name. We come from a rising and falling of swords, a blood smeared upon in the horse, of states and their curse and the worth and the order, self-will no more. My tongue comes from a civilization that worships the pen and the fence and the men, it's all men and their minds. What to ken from it all when the others were burned with their words. I could be from people who saw a disorder in poor and strapped burden and death to their backs while they hoarded the grain, defiled the soul, left it laying from the rain and the work and the begging for more. But it might be that the people that fought in the fields and forests, their line of their young led to me, and the torrents that rage from mouth unto mouth through song incantation is what I breathe. But I breathe in the air that was stolen from others, from black and brown bodies, children wrenched from mothers, the ships, the trade, the cane, and the fight to the death, smothered, people failed in the name of the name. And I see pillars of bone and blood for our foundations, all these nations, the state, reactive independence. But independence is fraught with the gaping wound left from the soul trade in the empty womb. What's left? I turn to myself, to my womb, to the blood that flows ties and ties, to the roar and the swell, capsizing the ships that sought dominance. It trues and it wills common sense. And what is truth if not sense of our fingers, our tongues, and our ears fumbling round for roots to follow, linger. We cannot lie to our bodies, they know, little shells of our wild selves. So we live, and we dig and we pick at the scab of a guilt that just needs time to heal. How to be real to another when the things that have built us are the thefts and the kills and the wills of a wasteland. We come from sickness in soil, the rich in their spoils. We are children of Luddites and pagans and diggers, or we are children of war, of gentry, of piety, however we came here. Burnt by the same flame that splits veins, casts chains, rearranges our minds into confessions and naming names. Kill the cop in your head, but what if the cop that is there is 1,000-year-old figurehead? The pain we inflict is a sign of the pain that bore blood and burnt crops in the homestead. It is there that we come home to ourselves, come home to the things that were stolen from us long ago. It's for the ancestors.
Oh, amen, indeed. I hate to steal the thunder, I tell you what, but I feel obligated as per my role to light the final candle. To all of your joys, so they may be amplified infinitely. To all the concerns and sorrows and grief and anger, may they be eased or flamed as they need to. May your whole humanity and your whole spiritual self be reflected in this candle. May the world's concerns and joys be reflected in this candle. I keep on singing it. Amen and blessed be. Dearly beloved, we have one of my favorite hymns to go. Hymn number 98, Love Will Guide Us. If you've never sang it before, you're in for a treat. Well, I'm biased. Sorry, Steve. Oh, yes.
You'll see that the second verse is different from the first verse and the third verse. And the underlay for the first and third verse is by the music. The second verse, I'm just giving you a little bit of a hint of how it goes, because otherwise, given that it's a song about peace, you might not feel very peaceful. trying to fit the words with the melody. So in the second verse, if you just listen once, you'll get it, I think. Some syllables or words have rather a long time to wait before you go on to the next bit. And you'll hear that. So it goes, the second verse, I won't quite sing it, I'll give the rhythm. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, this is the awkward one coming. Where do we get to? That's that one. You can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Okay, got it? That's verse 2.
Dearly beloved, one benediction to you all. And this is borrowed from a Taino version of Our Father. Well, borrowed / inspired. I'm honest, I had a bit of artistic liberty with it. Creator of the universe, maker of the sky, earth, sea, and moon, hold us as we recognize your divine presence around us and in our lives. Sacred, holy, and abundant Spirit, we honor your light. Give us rain, sustenance, provide abundance. Manifest balance in the world, the spiritual, the ecological, and the social. Bring justice. Give us the bread of life and the wisdom of the ages. Architect of the universe, protect us from hurricanes, storms, and fire as they bring balance to nature, renew, and cleansing nature. But let us be present in the now and be of service to the world with our ancestors' blessing. Let it be so. Amen and blessed be. We'll have a postlude, but then the service will end. I don't know if y'all do announcements. I forgot to check, but please, Stuart will close us out. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Hey, I need a copy of that composition. Sure.